Hello, Tiger fans. We are ready for football this week as Eli Drinkwitz makes his debut against the Alabama Crimson Tide Saturday at Faurot Field. This is our first digital luncheon or virtual luncheon of the year. And our guest today from the Kansas City Star, Souichi Terada, who for just about a year has now been the beat writer for Tiger Athletics, but it's his first appearance for the Tiger Club. Welcome, Souichi.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate you guys having me, and appreciate you guys saying my name right. That is not a guarantee in my part of the town.
Hey, just before we get into Mizzou, I want to get a little of your background. You grew up in the Detroit area, understand, and you told me you were a little bit of a frustrated Detroit sports fan, but Michigan State grad, correct?
Yeah, I grew up in Metro Detroit, about 30 minutes north of Detroit, so I would make it downtown, like 3, 4 times a month usually when I was growing up. So that was a lot of fun. Like you said, Detroit sports isn't doing too hot right now. I just kind of watch from afar. Working for the Star, it's a little bit easier for me to watch the Chiefs right now, and I don't think anybody will blame me on that. But yeah, went to Michigan State. I actually graduated last year. Spent the exciting, kind of fun 4 years there. I actually, I don't want to sound too cliche about college, about the best years of your life, but I really enjoyed it there. So then I ended up here at Mizzou at Columbia, and I've loved it here for the last coming up on a year, which is kind of crazy. I think the last half year, especially since the pandemic hit, has been kind of the big blur. But overall, I've really enjoyed my time here.
So how did you get from Michigan to Kansas City Star?
Yeah, it was really for the job. The funny thing is, actually, I won't go too much into detail, but during the job search, just the way it happens, my boss, Jeff Rosen at the Star, he reached out to me a couple of days after I had gotten a job offer at a competing or a different paper that I was planning to take. So he kind of came at the 11th hour there, and then things kind of moved quick, I realized. Mizzou was midseason. They were kind of stringing together the winning streak, so they really wanted Alex Schiffer's replacement, who ended up being me. So it like I said, I think if Jeff had come like a day or two later, I don't think I would have gotten the job. So it is kind of just the way things roll. And I'm super grateful he did reach out on like a Wednesday or something. It was like a Wednesday at like 6 p.m. my time, Eastern time. And then I was like, whoa, okay, I got to kind of think things over. And then next thing you know, I'm driving from Michigan to Columbia, and then I'm getting some Booch's Burgers with some fellow beat writers of mine.
Well, it sounds like you've settled in Columbia pretty well. And you've really done a great job covering the team. You're pretty prolific. You had 2 big stories in the paper on Sunday, I noticed.
Thank you.
Let's talk about the Tigers. What a year, or what, I don't know how good a feel. I mean, you can't be around the team much under the COVID restrictions. We have a brand new head coach. What kind of feel do you have so far?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, it's really hard just because I haven't had a full training camp with Mizzou football, and it would have been different this year anyway with a first-year coach. So I think we've heard bits and pieces, from the players, from the coaches. I mean, they've been pretty silent. I mean, the funny thing is, if you can kind of tell, like if you ask about the quarterbacks, they'll be like, yeah, yeah, they're looking good. They're kind of mum about it. They're not, I guess, revealing the hand too much. And obviously, that's Eli Drinkwitz's. That's his thing, or that's his choice. So you kind of have to take what you get. But yeah, I really think off field, I mean, Drinkwitz has done a lot of good things. There's a lot of excitement on the recruiting trail. He's done, he's done whatever you can say about him as a head football coach, he's done a really good job getting his players trust and respect, and you can tell that just from the players and just the way they speak about him. And I think that's kind of commendable, just because you look at the situation right now, you don't really get them in person. You've had it somewhere in Zoom meetings like we're doing, but it's not the same when doing it in person, especially when you're building something so intimate, like trust and actually being able to go to kind of a father figure, a mentor figure. So there's been a lot of things he's done off the field. I think it'll be really difficult to kind of judge the on-field product whenever this thing gets started, which is Saturday, of course. But I think the Zoo fans should be excited, just because I think they've done really well with the branding of just new Zoo and just kind of flipping a new page and just really making sure that, hey, yeah, we Mizzou has had, Gary Pinkel and Barry Odom and kind of the same regime, just because of, just their connection and everything. But Drinkwitz has really come in here and kind of said, hey, this is my thing now. We're going to brand it as such. We're going to work at it as such. And at least off the field thus far, it's worked. So I think Mizzou fans should and are really excited right now.
I don't know if you were there, but in February he came and talked to the Tiger Club at the flea market. And we had a great crowd for him. He really connected with everybody, and he also bought beer for everybody there, which immediately made him very
Genius.
popular. But he is there wasn't a lot of coach speak there, I guess you'd say. He is a unique personality and a young, vibrant guy too. So I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote about it in my Big Sunday profile feature. He's only 37 years old, and he's by far, I want to say, by around a decade, the youngest coach in the SEC, and you can tell that just the energy. I don't know if you guys remember it, but I remember back in February during signing day, the normal signing day, they signed a kid out of Dallas, Ennis Rakestraw, who's getting a lot of hype, and they post a video of him just super excited, and you kind of peel back the curtain, but in a good way there, I think, just showing the kind of that trademark energy that Drink was going to bring. And I think people have really gravitated toward that, especially just because the way last year went, Jim Sirk mentioned this, and I've mentioned this in a few articles, it really does seem like momentum kind of slowed down. And it just wasn't just because of the losses, but just the way those games were played. I mean, I was there, like I don't cheer for Mizzou just because I'm a sports journalist, but those games were hard to watch just from a football aesthetic perspective. And I think watching that, I don't want to bring back too many bad memories, but, I think there was a bit of momentum stalled, and Drinkwitz has kind of been pushing it a little bit more, and fans, like I said, are really gravitating toward that.
I believe your first game last year was a Vanderbilt game.
Yeah, I thought we were going to bring it up, but
no, I just like to get your perspective, because they looked so good during that 5-game winning streak at home, and then it just like the offense dropped off a cliff. Did you get any feel what happened? I didn't know it was just coming in.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, I actually specifically remember coming into the game because I came in mid-season. They were 5-1, number 22 at that point. So I made it a point, actually, of watching through every game. I think it was like the first 6 games in like 7 days or something. Like I watched one each day, and I was like, oh. And I was like, obviously taking my notes, but that offense just looks so explosive. I forgot what the numbers are. It was like 38.8 points per game the first half of the season. Even Wyoming, they were putting up points. Like it was crazy how much of a shift it was. And so I come in, and then, there was that Vanderbilt game, and one of the touchdowns was off-legged interception, and they just weren't able to move the ball, and it was kind of crazy. And then it just kind of snowballed from there. So I think it was kind of difficult to maybe, by all indications from what has been reported and what I've heard, like there wasn't like a big moment or anything that kind of just resulted in kind of the bad vibes of that team, but it really was kind of night and day. And it was so weird, I mean, they were a ranked team, and then 6 games later, you're on a coaching search, and all of a sudden you're kind of like, whoa, what happened here? And I think that's kind of just indicative of what college football and football in general is. It's just things can change so quickly over just a matter of, a month and a half.
So, well, let's talk about this year. First thing I want to talk about is we've been reported by you and others. We have 12 players that are COVID positive and cannot play this week. We don't know who they are, obviously, but it's a good thing we're playing a patsy like Alabama to get the situation. But do you have any feel for what areas have been affected the most by the positive tests of the COVID?
Yeah, so pretty much it's the, like I said, we aren't at practice, so we can't just scratch the roster. But from the past few weeks, offensive line has really had a rough time. I think Drinkwitz made a little anecdote, I guess. He was like, we've had 5 starting left guards in the last 5 practices, and that was like a week and a half ago, which is, for a offensive line, one, you're not that experienced on the offensive line. This isn't like last year when there were 3 members of that line last year who are on either NFL rosters or practice squads, including Yasir Durant with the Chiefs. But, this is a really young line. Your center is very experienced, Michael Maietti. He's a grad transfer, so it's his first year in the program. Like, it's if there was enough, if there was a position that you didn't want to get hit, it was probably offensive line, just because of the chemistry. And by all indications, we're hearing that. And then, I'm really just maybe curious or skeptical just how that looks, because you can have the greatest quarterback behind, you can have the greatest quarterback playing for you, but if that offensive line can't block, or they're just battered by injuries and COVID, then there's not much they can do. Like, you can have Patrick Mahomes back there. Patrick Mahomes is just running for his life, with these DNs and D-linemen coming after him, then even he can't do that much. So that's kind of the big place. And obviously otherwise, I've heard, we've heard specialists have kind of been battling some stuff. And obviously Drinkwitz is really stressed on special teams. And in my story, actually Sunday, I kind of show why it was, because he actually, one of his first coaching jobs was in special teams. So that's why he takes it so seriously. But yeah, I mean, those two spots are, I mean, I'm not trying to like discount any other positional groups on a football team. They're all important, but yeah, I mean, those two areas we've heard is that's rough no matter how you shake it.
Yeah, it really a couple of really interesting stories I mentioned yesterday. Sort of the evolution of Eli Drinkwitz. Talked a lot with Gus Malzahn. That really looked like a fun piece to work on, and Malzahn was very open with you about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Gus was great. You know, I actually have a close friend of mine is on the Auburn beat, so I was actually texting her, and I was like, "Hey, I'm talking to Gus today." She's like, "Oh, yeah, just asking about this and this." And it was cool just because actually I wasn't able to use it for the story, but I was able to go back through some Google archives and saw some photos of, you know, Eli in his Arkansas State gear or Auburn gear with Gus, and then Rep Lashley too, who's Miami's offensive coordinator, and they're all close as well. So yeah, I mean that was a fun story to work on. I think when Eli told me that little anecdote that I started with about getting caught napping my Gus, it just felt like a perfect place to start, just because that was, you know, the biggest takeaway from me was that was 1 decade ago, 10 years ago, and that's in football coaching. That's, you know, that's not very long. A lot of things had to go right for Eli, but at the same time, you know, talking to everyone, they kind of all said the same things and similar things, and just that his energy is infectious, and I think Mizzou fans are seeing that right now. And really, when I think the biggest thing about being a head football coach is people don't realize, like, you are really much a CEO. Like, you have to care about everything. It's so different from a coordinator job where, you know, if you're offensive coordinator, you only need to care about the offense. You know, if you win 17-7, you're going to be mad that you only scored 17. But as a head coach, you won the game. You know, that's what matters at the end of the day. And Eli has talked about that. So I think just seeing his progression over the last decade was kind of fascinating. I've talked to a few, you know, NC State people and App State people too, for a few stories, and they all had, you know, good things to say about Eli. So yeah, that was a lot of fun though, talking to Gus and Brett and a lot of Eli's old friends who are still in the coaching profession.
Great piece you wrote there. And then you also had your 5 bowl projections, or predictions, I should say, for Mizzou this season. Let's talk about a couple of those. Quarterback, we think Sean Robinson. Taylor Powell's transferred. Is Connor Bazelak, is he 100% after the injury last year?
Yeah, by all indications, like I said, can't be at practice, but by all indications, he's 100% to go. He's been taking snaps. He should be good to go. I think fans are pretty high on him, and admittedly, why wouldn't they be? You know, like I remember I was at the Georgia game last year, and Bazelak had the best drive of that day. It was admittedly in garbage time, but at the same time, it's like you're a true freshman quarterback playing on ESPN, you know, at Georgia in front of a packed house. Like, that's not an easy place to move the ball at. And it was still cold. It was loud still. And he was able to get it done. He showed some good things in the Arkansas game. So, by all predictions or projections, we believe it will be Robinson, just because of maybe that experience. And I think that dual threat type really helps him. But, you know, Bazelak has shown some things in very small spurts, but as a true freshman, he did impress. So I think that those are maybe some things to be positive about, despite the dozen COVID positives.
You had some really positive things to say about the defense and the running backs. Talk a little about those areas.
Yeah, I'll start with the running back just because it's easy, and I'll let Tyler Beatty, as he said, he is the most versatile running back in the SEC. Funny thing is, I think he meant to say best, but he kind of backtracked and said most versatile. So I think you can make an argument for that. I mean, anytime a running back leads the team in receiving, like last year, it's not a good thing, but it means something at least. And then you got another captain, Larry Roundtree, who has, you know, he's an established SEC running back. Funny thing too, I've actually thought about this, because of the blanket eligibility. Essentially, all players get another year next year. Roundtree can actually kind of compete for the Mizzou all-time leading rusher crown. I guess I believe he's around 1,500 yards behind first place. But you know,
Smith. It's Brad Smith.
Yeah, Brad Smith. Yep. Obviously, he's not a running back.
But it's yardage.
Yeah, but so like he's only 1,500 yards behind, and then one season that's rough. But if you get 2, then, you know, you get however many, 700 to 800 in a 10-game SEC season, and then you can kind of wrap it up next year. So if he comes back, like, that's definitely on the table. Kind of unorthodox, but that's what it is. Yeah. And then obviously defense. I mean, that's kind of the thing I think Mizzou fans should feel good about. I mean, you lost a lot of great players, like DeMarcus Acey. I think had a big say in that secondary as a captain and a cornerback. Losing a Jordan Elliott never helps, but you still bring back a lot of guys. Nick Bolton, I mean, that's the guy everyone should be looking for. And by all indications, he's been that guy, the guy on defense. So I don't think anybody should be worried about him. But other than that, I mean, you look at the roster and you see a Tyree Gillespie and you see a Joshua Bledsoe, Kobe Whiteside, and you see clear talent on that team. It's just there are still some, question marks maybe. I mean, I don't know what the defensive end positions are going to look like. I mean, Chris Turner and Trey Williams and a few other guys are good players. They've started a lot of games, but that production just hasn't been there. So there are a little bit of question marks. I think Mizzou fans can still be excited about it, but at the same time, I'm curious to see how Ryan Walters looks as defense coordinator without his mentor, Barry Odom there. I think that's kind of I don't think it's a huge thing, but I also think it's a factor, where maybe you struggle for a game, struggles for a stretch, you can kind of go to a defensive first head coach, but it's a different game with Eli Drinkwitz back or as your head coach, just because one, he's offense first, and I asked him about this during training camp, but he's trash talking the defense just for fun during practice. Like it is kind of different world when comparing coaches, and sometimes that could be good, sometimes that could be bad, but it's just kind of something to keep an eye on. But yeah, running back at defense, if there are places to be optimistic about, winning games or competing in the SEC, 10-game SEC only schedule, I think you started those two spots.
This is probably a little bit difficult question to answer for you since you haven't been able to see them practice or play a lot, but do you see any true freshmen making an immediate impact this year?
Yeah, Ennis Rakestraw Jr. has been kind of the talk of camp, this cornerback. By all indications, I think he should be competing for playing time and everything. So that's one guy to keep an eye on. J.C. Carlisle, he's another cornerback who has been making a lot of, kind of waves. Dylan Spencer's another guy, offensive lineman. We've heard bits and pieces of guys like J.J. Huster and Chance Looper, who is actually Curtis Looper, running backs coach's son, and they've been doing pretty well. And then so it's kind of bits and pieces. I mean, once again, it's kind of hard to say how, they play, and they can look great in practice, but at the end of the day, this is an SEC schedule. Like, I think the biggest question for me is just the physicality of the game, just because you've only had a few months in this kind of shortened, weird, unprecedented preseason camp where you're not really going through the conditioning that you normally can. I mean, the thing is too, and you talk to college football reporters, coaches, anybody involved in the sport, you see such a huge jump, especially those true freshmen that come in the spring. You see such a huge jump from the spring to the fall in terms of just what their body looks like and how much muscle they've been able to gain being in a college football facility and strength and conditioning program. And they can look, once again, they can look great in practice, but will they be able to just grind and be able to kind of survive essentially week by week in the SEC? That's kind of remained to be seen. So good thing so far, and I think Drinkwitz did a great job kind of salvaging that 2020 recruiting class, even though he came in like 10 days before the early signing period. But yeah, I mean, keep an eye on those guys, but also kind of be skeptical just because it is such a weird year. We don't know what that's going to look like.
Give us a scouting report on Alabama. I'm sure they're weak as usual.
Yeah, Alabama. I actually just wrote about this like an hour or two ago and it's posted live. They're pretty much the same in the sense that they're going to be Alabama. I mean, they're number 2 for a reason. Otherwise, though, the weird thing too is that they kind of they kind of took a step back last season in the sense that they had 2 regular season losses, and obviously that was to the national champion LSU and rival Auburn in a shootout. So that's just kind of how it is. Yeah, but I mean they're pretty much looking the same. I think it's really difficult to just be like, Mizzou's a 28-point underdog by the betting lines and everything. So it is difficult to maybe project, an upset or anything. But if they are competitive, I think that'll go a long way. It seems Mac Jones as a starter for Alabama, which I think kind of gives some clarity to Mizzou. There was some questions, who would be quarterback for Alabama, but at least, they have a starter so they can kind of scout for that. But I guess, if there is some good parts is that Mizzou, nobody knows their starting quarterbacks yet, and that kind of poses some challenges, obviously. And then you don't really know what they're going to put on film yet, just because it is the first game. So I guess historically underdogs have done well early in the year. So if there is a sliver of hope, maybe that's kind of where you're pointing at.
Alabama, the university, was had one of the bigger outbreaks of
Mhm.
COVID when school opened. But Nick Saban's been playing it pretty close to the vest, I understand, and talking about whether he has any players out.
Mhm.
Is that correct? He hasn't been real open about that like Eli has.
Yeah, so Mizzou has actually done a decent job. At the beginning, they weren't going to release many numbers, and then I think with it being COVID and kind of a public health thing, I don't think people were too thrilled about that. But yeah, they've done a good job. Obviously, we got the dozen. Just actually at this point, actually, I want to put a disclaimer like those are old numbers. That was from last Sunday, not yesterday Sunday, but last Sunday's testing results, and they get tested Sunday, Wednesday, Friday now because they're part of the SEC game week protocols, guidelines, all those things. So, you know, that honestly, by the sounds of it from Drinkwitz, that number might go up when we talk to him on tomorrow, or whenever this recording goes live. We talk to Eli tomorrow at noon on Tuesday. So that, that's the thing. And then Alabama, based on what has been reported, obviously, I think Saban talks like now or like right around now. So I don't know the most recent information, but the most recent time it's been reported, he was pretty much like, yeah, I don't know if anybody's going to, who knows who's going to be out for the Missouri game. He kept it extremely close to the vest, and I think it's kind of the frustrations that come with this, in the sense that everyone's, the SEC is kind of going through the same guidelines and the processes and testings and everything like that. That's great. You need that to play football season, but like teams are, like you said, like keeping it close to the vest in terms of they're not releasing numbers, and I just don't think. With injuries, I get it, gamesmanship, all that kind of stuff. But with COVID, I just feel like it is kind of a public health thing, and it just kind of leaves maybe a bad taste in the mouth when you're not releasing those numbers. Whereas Mizzou is being pretty transparent about this and isn't shying away from this. And Eli, for to his credit, like he definitely seemed frustrated when we spoke to him last week, but he also kind of took not the punches, I guess, but he took the questions and answered them kind of in a fair way and everything.
One of your 5 bowl predictions was an interesting one, that at some point in the season, whether Missouri or the opponent, a game would have to be postponed or canceled. Um, you still feel that's going to happen?
Yeah, just because I mean, I mentioned this in the article, but we already saw a Mizzou game get impacted. Florida versus Missouri soccer game, that was moved from the opening week, which was a couple of days ago, and that was before the season started. And that was soccer. I know different sports, but with just so many players, and that the SEC releases game threshold, cancellation threshold. So essentially, if you can't put together either a 53-man roster or a specific positional guidelines, like you can either reschedule the game or it'll be deemed a no contest. So I mean, I think that's kind of not maybe inevitable, because what we're seeing in the NFL is very, very, like that is awesome. Like there hasn't been many at least positive cases, especially after the travel. I think the NFL is setting a good precedent in that, and showing that there is a way of doing this even without a bubble. But yeah, I mean, it's just, like I've been telling people this, but like I was in college last year. Like I know how college students just kind of operate. Like, and another thing too is like you talk about probability wise, you got 110, 115 kids on the roster. If 1%, which isn't that many kids, if 1% messes up and breaks protocol or anything, that can lead to an outbreak, and you don't want it to happen, but 1%, isn't low. And then probability wise, that's probably still going to happen just because of the number of students on a football roster. So those are just things to consider. I really, I think on Twitter, you can kind of get sucked into it, and people assume sports journalists don't want sports, which is ridiculous. I love sports. It's why I do this profession. I don't want there to be a cancellation. I want to, cover this team. I want to cover sports. I want to be in a press box and hear, the roar of the crowd, however small that may be Saturday. But at the end of the day, it's just talking reality. And I just think that it's at least one game might be changed. And, like I said, like it might not even be Missouri's fault. It might be, some other SEC East team's fault. And then that's not Missouri's fault. That's just how it is. So, and that it's just too many factors. So I guess I'm defending the prediction here, but that's just how I feel about it, I guess.
For our fans our viewers who are going to go down to the game this week, what sort of protocols do they need to be aware of?
Yeah, so SEC definitely says wear your mask, and I think, it's probably good. It's a 6 p.m. kick, like it's probably going to be chilly, so I'll probably want to wear a mask just to like stay warm, honestly. So that kind of helps. But you're going to see other things like social distancing. I heard actually from a few students, there were like these people, like there was staff with like essentially these like long sticks. I don't know, like maybe used for limbo or something. Like they were kind of waving it around just to make sure, groups weren't sitting too close to each other and everything like that. So, yeah, I mean, I believe I was told by a spokesperson, MU, that around approximately 11,800 people is their capacity that they're looking at, which, that's still a pretty big game. One thing too, actually, I covered the game once where there was like a 4-hour lightning delay. And then they essentially left fans, just whoever wanted, to come in for free after the lightning delay. And it still got loud in there. And there was maybe not 10, 20,000 fans in there. So, even with the low numbers, like I still think you can create a decent atmosphere. It's not going to be, sold out for Row Field by any means, but you can still create a decent atmosphere. But yeah, I mean, expect to wear a mask, expect to, social distance. I believe there will also be kind of these zones where specific, tickets groups, like if you're in a certain section, you have to enter through a certain gate. That way they can kind of, isolate these little sections or gates or whatever. So I think it'll be absolutely different. I hope you guys still have a great time at the game, any fans going. But at the same time, it will be different. It will be kind of weird, but hopefully it will only be for 1 year. And I think that's kind of the hope with Mizzou as well.
And no tailgating, correct?
Yes, no tailgating. I'm sure fans will try to get around that, but I believe the way they're going to enforce it is like any on-campus or anything like the way it was kind of, I read it and explained to me, was any official like MU like property or parking lot or anything like that, like official campus grounds, you are not allowed to tailgate on. Like I said, fans will probably get around that. I'm sure there are loopholes or some ways of doing it. I think I want to say, I doubt they're going to be maybe like going up to cars. I mean, like you can't eat out of the back of your car or anything. So, there are kind of ways of going about it. But yes, as of now, no tailgating.
How will your game day procedure change, and what will be the setup in the press box? Do you know?
Yeah, so everything is over Zoom, which is unfortunate just because, as a reporter, I love building relationships with players. I mean, it's kind of funny. Like I ran into a player right at the beginning of the pandemic, right after I got back from Nashville, actually in mid-March. And we saw each other and we're like, hey, what's up, man? Yeah, you buying food too and buying toilet paper and just stuff like that. So that's always a fun time. So unfortunately, it'll be all over Zoom. I think, I don't want to make excuses, but I really do think that's going to be kind of a struggle for just stories, just because everyone's going to be writing the same thing. We're seeing kind of that with Chiefs, but otherwise, press box will be 50% capacity. So, there will be a lot more space between me and the next person. I'll be honest, I'm not necessarily mad about that. Sometimes it gets pretty cramped in those press boxes, especially at, the smaller facilities. Like I remember Vanderbilt was kind of a smaller press box and everything. So you're kind of up against, Arkansas War Memorial Stadium and Little Rock. You're like kind of right up against, touching each other's elbows. So I'm not necessarily mad about that, but it will be different. I believe, not official yet, but I believe our columnist Bahe Gregorian will be joining me game one, so that should be fun. And then there's other procedures that's different, like 2 people in the press box elevator only. You got to wear masks all the time. But I'll be honest with you, I'm really looking forward to game day. Fun little thing I do is I've been growing out my hair, as you can see, since the pandemic started. So in preparation for game, I'm gonna get a haircut and just kind of look super fresh and everything. So I'm like super excited for my haircut on Friday, just because I'm looking forward to it for like the last like few months now. So that's like kind of a side thing I've been doing for fun.
You are a little hairier than your picture.
My girlfriend hates it. She absolutely hates it.
So what did Missouri do to upset the SEC on this schedule? This is unbelievable what they had.
Yeah, great question. I'm not too sure. I think the funnier thing actually is you look at Arkansas' schedule and realize they probably got it somehow worse, because you look at Arkansas, let's spell it out. One, they play the SEC West, so they're going to play all those juggernaut teams. Then they somehow add Georgia and Florida, which is I just don't understand how that, to me, Mizzou fans should definitely be mad. Arkansas fans should be they should be just irate, because once again, SEC West, you add Georgia, you add Florida, and your crossover game to begin with was Tennessee. So you get Mizzou always because of the battle line rivalry, but then you had Tennessee, who they should be 3rd or 4th. Like they're going to be pretty good. I just turned in my SEC media ballot, and I got them 3rd in the SEC East after their finish last year. So it just doesn't make any sense for me how you add the 2 best teams. And then you look at a team like Mizzou, maybe you can kind of if you're kind of loose with the logistics, you add Alabama and LSU, but at the same time, you were facing Arkansas and Mississippi State, maybe two of the worst teams. So you probably weren't going to get Ole Miss. So of the four, you were looking at Bama, LSU, Texas A&M, and Auburn. And Texas A&M and Auburn, they're both looking pretty good, top 15 teams. You'd feel maybe a little bit better if you got an LSU and maybe Auburn or Texas A&M, but you can kind of loosely figure it out. I know, and Mizzou fans, or not Mizzou fans, but Mizzou players and coaches, they're going to say, bring it on. But at the same time, if you are a fan, I'd be kind of maybe a little frustrated with the schedule. And the biggest thing I've actually been told is just what this does long-term for recruiting, just because, if you go 3-7 or 4-6 with this schedule in your first year because of a pandemic, at the end of the day, that doesn't look too bad. But from an outsider maybe looking in, from a high schooler's point looking in, like 4-6 or 3-7 doesn't look that great. 5-5 doesn't even look that great, even though 5-5 would be incredible for what based on what the schedule looks like. So I think that's the biggest thing. I mean, you can, with the schedule between with the non-conference games, if you got to 6-6 or 7-5, you feel pretty good about that schedule. Whereas now that you lose, maybe not even cupcake games, just because Louisiana, the Raging Cajuns obviously beat Iowa State, and then BYU was on the road. Like, that was not necessarily an easy schedule, but a path to 7-5 or even 8-4 with a few bounces was there. Whereas this schedule, like a path to 5-5 is really difficult. So I just think that long-term wise, I'm just curious to see what this year does, just because Eli Drinkwitz can sell the idea of Mizzou and everything right now. But if your 1 year is 3-7 because the SEC just kind of threw you under the bus a little bit, that makes it harder just long-term wise. So I think that's kind of a side thing that people haven't really considered, just because, it really is just, and I get it's the SEC, but adding Bama and LSU really does just add a whole nother wrinkle of things to the conversation.
Talk a little about recruiting. Coach Drinkwitz really appears to be getting a good start on that. Some good commitments so far. I've been very impressed. Your comments on that?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. If I were a Mizzou fan, I'd be super happy with that right now. I mean, you look at my alma mater, Michigan State. Actually, Mel Tucker kind of had a lower thing, or his timing was a little bit worse than Drinkwitz's, but he hasn't been able to, get the recruits that Drinkwitz has. And you look at that, and I think the thing is too, like, you look at the stars and everything, but what I did over the summer was I actually spoke to a few recruits, and, it really does seem like, one, they're selling the program well, but two, like, I really do think the dead period is not beneficial to anybody, I think, but it might have maybe helped Mizzou a little bit, in the sense that, instead of having coaches, like, for example, linebackers coach DJ Smith, he's in charge of, like, the Indianapolis area. They're doing more regional recruiting as opposed to positional recruiting, like the last regime did. So, you don't necessarily, like, have to, drive to 5.5, 6 hours to Indianapolis. You can just FaceTime them and still build that connection. And it kind of maybe leveled the playing field a little bit. When you're a Bama or an Ohio State or even a Michigan, like, you can just be like, hey, look at our facilities, look at how amazing they are, and just kind of sell it like that, do a lot more in person. So I think maybe that helped Mizzou a little bit. But otherwise, I mean, yeah, they've been just doing such a good job of just picking up personnel that I think they believe in. And there's just so much excitement behind it. I mean, in talking to the recruits, like, they've been really impressed by this Drinkwitz's just energy. And I think it helps, at the end of the day, being 37 years old and not necessarily the same generation, but you can kind of relate to them a little bit more compared to, maybe 65 or 70-year-old head coach who, yeah, they are very successful, but, it really is this bigger generational gap and all these things. I think the youth has absolutely helped Drinkwitz in this case.
Well, and if there's a bright side to COVID, I guess, the recruiting restrictions that the NCAA had on Missouri, it seems that would have leveled the playing field a little, since you can't travel anyway. And other sports, both baseball and softball, were not going to be able to play postseason last year. Well, that's gone now. So, being the optimist, I guess there was something good about COVID. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's great that, baseball and softball don't have that postseason ban anymore. I talked to a few people around the program, and they were just like, yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing too, if they had gotten 2 years of postseason ban, it's really kind of the mental toll. I mean, you go through 2020, you know that you can't make the postseason, you're not working toward that, College World Series or Women's College World Series. and then having that for a whole another year after COVID, like that's just, mentally, if I was a college student athlete, I'd be like, man, I don't know if I can take that, So, obviously, if you were going to have a postseason, man, it's great that you had it during COVID. So yeah, like you said, positive sides of COVID. Drukas has not been has voiced his displeasure, I guess, with the NCAA and his the scholarship limitations, because he loses 4. He's at 81 roster spots, and then the recruiting restrictions. They actually have to go through their own dead period. So dead period for them means a little bit different because they actually have to go no contact, which obviously doesn't help with their recruits. So they're still kind of dealing with that. So yeah, but I guess it is better than compared to programs who can visit them in person. So that's also a good point there.
So apologize. I had a little background noise there. My technological skills came forth, though. Anyway, let's. I want to talk a little about Cuonzo Martin. He's had some good recruiting wins here in the last couple months. You want to talk a little about his class? Looks like he's got a pretty good freshman class coming in for next year.
Yeah, it's hovering right around that top 25. I think I will put the disclaimer out there that sometimes recruiting restrictions are sometimes affected just by like pure number of people, and Mizzou graduates a lot of talent next year. You lose a Jeremiah Tillman, a Drew Smith, a Mark Smith, a Mitchell Smith. The trio Smiths all leave at once, and then you got a guy like Xavier Pinson who might dabble in the pros again and then leaves. I think and you actually have an open scholarship spot now because just the way it kind of rolled out. But yeah, I mean, Cuonzo has. I think I'm hoping to actually full disclosure, I'm actually hoping to speak to Cuonzo in the next couple of days here, just about recruiting and the season and everything. But I just in talking to him and what he said, I think he's kind of understanding a little bit that when you do bring in freshmen, there is absolutely kind of a game where they might not be ready, but you might have to play them, otherwise they're going to transfer. And I think we saw that a little bit with Mario McKinney and Trey Jackson both leaving, and they just weren't getting as much playing time as they probably wanted, or outside, at least for one of them, based on what I've heard, outside voices kind of told one of them to leave just because of playing time essentially. So I think he's kind of learned that you can bring in, and obviously if you get a Michael Porter Jr. or someone, or a Jonte Porter, like, you're going to play them regardless because they're good. But sometimes, there is kind of this game or, just reality where if freshmen, they want to play now, they want to all go pro, like, they're not necessarily in it for the grind of becoming, 4-year players in your senior year is your best year, like college basketball was, even 5-10 years ago. Like, this has been a really recent change. And I think Cuonzo has kind of learned from the past few years. It's just kind of been like, okay, let's look at guys who, if we're not necessarily in on the top 150 guys in the nation, then maybe let's go to guys who are under recruited and kind of see what we have there. And maybe that is like a Caleb Brown. Maybe he's not ranked so high, but he's going to be a good fit because his brother Kobe's there and just things like that. And I talked to Sean, I don't know how to say his last name, Sean Gordon, I believe. He's, in speaking to him, like, the thing that stuck out about him was he was kind of like, not like mad, but he was very disappointed he was under recruited and he was finally getting those Power 5 looks and everything. And he was finally able to kind of get his name out there and get, at least be a 3-star and everything. So I think Cuonzo is looking at a very specific breed too, in terms of positions, just long, lengthy guys who know how to play defense. And obviously in the Cuonzo Martin system, that fits great. So I really do think Cuonzo has kind of maybe learned from his, not mistakes, but just what the game is, or what the kind of the basketball environment is nowadays, with kind of the expectations true freshmen come in with.
Both the men's and women's basketball schedules are a little bit up in the air, I guess. What is the determination? They're going to start November 25th. Is that right? And what about the holiday or the Thanksgiving weekend tournament? What's the status?
Yeah, day before Thanksgiving, November 25th, which is great. I mean, that's still, it's been reported that Myrtle Beach Invitational is actually going to be in Orlando in a bubble-like environment. So honestly, like, based on what I've heard from the basketball program, like, they don't really know at this point either, just because, it's still up in the air. And it's good that we have a start date. It's good that, we know when Mizzou basketball will start practicing and everything. Those things are set in stone as of now, and that's great. But at the same time, we just don't know what the schedule will look like. I a couple months ago, I heard rumblings of an SEC only schedule this year and just kind of NCAA tournament. But at the same time, it looks like we're going to get at least a few non-conference games. So yeah, that's still up in the air. I wouldn't mind, traveling to Orlando in November, especially if it's in a bubble and I don't have to interact with too many people. So I'm crossing my fingers for there at least.
One thing of great interest to the fans up here was the revival of the border rivalry with MU and KU. I guess that's up in the air right now, right?
Yeah, date-wise, bragging rights and border war showdown, whatever they're going with now, that is not affected, but you never know. I mean, the thing we do know is that it's not going to be what we all expected it to be when it happened, unfortunately. Funny thing, too, is actually I show up on the beat, Mizzou. My first day was Mizzou Vanderbilt. 2 days later, I'm back home hanging out after coming back from Nashville on Monday, getting ready for, I think, Kentucky. Border war is coming back, and I was like, whoa, it's like my second day here, and then the border war is already back. I was like, whoa, that's and I'm obviously I circled that game the moment it came out just because bragging rights is an awesome environment just because you get Illinois and Mizzou fans, but based on everything I've heard about that charity game from a few years ago, I'm extremely I was really looking forward to KU MU. Unfortunately, it probably won't be full capacity at the it's the Sprint Center now, right? I'm getting it mixed up. T-Mobile Center, okay. Now the T-Mobile Center. So unfortunately, it won't be like that, but hopefully it can still be played just because I think even with reduced capacity, I'm sure the rivalry will come out in full force.
I did the public address for that charity game, and it was like a practice game with an NCAA atmosphere. It was unbelievable. It was unbelievable. So I hope we can play it, but if not this year, next year. I want to ask you one more thing. Coach Drinkwitz, Coach Pinchton, Konzo, the Mizzou athletic department as a whole has really seemed to take a strong position on social justice this year. I'd like your comments on that.
Yeah, I think we're really seeing a reckoning with college sports in general and not just Mizzou because you're seeing a lot of student athletes realize, hey, we got this void, we got this platform, and whether that be social media or any other platform, they finally realize kind of the weight behind their words. And I think that's a cool thing, especially because it really is kind of a thing where you talk social justice, but they're a big thing, you see organizations like the Mizzou Mizzou Black Student Athlete Association, excuse me. You see what they're doing, and the biggest thing I think, and I think my colleague Sam Mellinger, just reading his columns, both sides of the extreme are maybe a little bit toxic, and I think people in the middle can agree with that. But I think their biggest thing is just that this is a human rights thing. I mean, whether that be social injustice, racial inequality, all these things, and you're seeing these, and the biggest thing I've actually been kind of impressed by is Mizzou isn't just doing things to raise awareness or being stand in solidarity. They're doing things to take action. You saw the peaceful march over the summer from the column, or I believe it started at the columns and the Boone County Courthouse, and then you see 62 student athletes registered to vote. That's doing something concrete, and I think that's the biggest thing, just because, at the end of the day, we can talk about social justice and all these, social inequality and all these things. And if we just sit on our hands and do nothing, then this was a waste of air, But Mizzou coming in and actually, registering to vote, and then the the BSAA, they have their own march and they're doing these things. And then Mizzou is doing some off-field initiatives, just to get back to the community. They're actually putting their action behind words. And I think, if you're a Mizzou fan, that's an awesome thing to see, just because once again, these student athletes have a platform, but actually doing something with that platform and actually giving back to the community, I think goes a long way, instead of just, let's talk about this. Which is always good. Let's start the dialogue, but let's also talk about this and do something about it. And I think, in talking to Konzo and Robin and Eli, they've really done a good job of just earning their team's trust too. And I've mentioned this with Drink, those captains, those players, whenever they talk about Eli, they know he has their backs. And I think that goes a really long way. And he's done a really good job with that. Once again, regardless of what the on-field results look like, I think that's a point of pride if you're a Mizzou fan, just because that is something that's pretty evident when you talk to the team. And so overall, though, I think it's a cool thing. I think, they're right around my age, and I think right around, I'm 23, when I was 19, 20 years old, that was kind of the time when I really looked at, who I was and who I was in this country. And I was like, okay, what can I do to, make this place that I was born in? I was born in Jersey, grew up in Michigan. I love this country. I've spent more time in Europe the past 10 years that I have Japan, which is where my parents are from. And I realized like the type of environment this country is. And I think the student athletes are seeing that now too, which is always an awesome thing. And I'm hoping Mizzou fans can be are pretty proud of that.
Right, but well said. So, any final thoughts before Saturday's game?
If you're coming to the game, actually, I hope you email me at ster88@kcstar.com. I'm hoping to maybe walk around Thoreau Field a little bit, the outside, and just catch up with some fans, see what they're doing here, and do a quick story. So if you're there, please reach out. One other thing, too, is the KC Star has a very cool new thing called the Mizzou Zone newsletter. It's very easy to sign up at, just at kansascity.com/Mizzou Zone. Every week, every Friday morning, it'll drop in your inbox. And the cool thing is I actually get to do a quick, 300-word blurb or whatever, just what I'm thinking, kind of a recap of the week. Maybe, I talk about my haircuts or whatever, just something fun on the side that I think I can kind of connect with fans and the readers, just because I think there is kind of that disconnect sometimes. So we're hoping to kind of talk to you guys, the readers, more. So hopefully, please sign up for that newsletter. We've done it for 2-3 weeks and I've had a lot of fun with it. So that's once again, that's kansascity.com/Mizzou Zone. Very easy to subscribe.
Souichi, thank you so much I know you're on a really busy schedule right now. We really appreciate your time, and we're anxious to get you up and visit us in person sometime.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, every time I'm in Kansas City, I get the barbecue. So it's not a very hard sell for me.
Look, next time it's on me. Let me know. So thank you so much. You're doing a great job, by the way. You really
Thank you.
Got a lot of good stories. And I know it's a challenging time, but we're going to make it through this, and things are going to be good at Mizzou. So anyway, Tiger fans, our next week on September 29th, we will go live with our Zoom meeting with Dennis Dodd of CBS Sports, and he's a regular visitor to the club. And again, that will be live on Zoom, and you'll have the chance to ask questions through the chat app, the chat feature of that application in real time. So that should be a great deal. I think our first taping today went really well with Souichi, and I think we'll do well next week with Dennis on the live feed. Couple other housekeeping issues. If you're interested in making a bid on our parking passes for either the season or single game, please email president@kctigerclub.com. And again, we're getting memberships. Even though we're not meeting in person, we still need you as members, need your support, and we'll keep you posted on everything going on with the club. And you can find out more at our website, kctigerclub.com. And of course, follow us on Twitter @kctigerclub. We will see you next Tuesday, September 29th. That will be at noon. It will be live. We will send you via email the instructions on how you can log on to Zoom. So everybody have a great week, and MIZ.